It's June 18th, 2022, and today, James Paul McCartney is 80 years old. Now, this is Mazzy. This is not a Beatles channel. I do not have a Beatles channel. I'm the biggest non-Beatles channel. But I love the Beatles, and you know that if you watch me. And so every once in a while I like to interject something about the Beatles. And I just thought this would be a fun way to celebrate Paul McCartney's 80th birthday. I mean, Jesus, when I first saw him on the Ed Sullivan Show, he was what, 21 years old, 1964, 21. He would turn 22 later that year in June. But in February, he was 21-year-old. So can you believe it? 59 years ago, 58 years ago. Peter McCartney. I want to just talk about some records and music. And you all know about his catalog. I'm not going to go through the entire catalog. This is not a ranking video. Just a little homage to the cute Beatle. 80 years old. I did just see him. You know, there's people that said, we don't need to see him anymore. His voice is shot. It was a fabulous show. And I've seen him many times over the years. And you can't deny the artistic talent and just love he has for music and performing. So let's pull some McCartney stuff. Let's see here. Of course, we all know his first solo album that he jumped the gun. Aside from the other Beatles doing solo albums, obviously, projects. I mean, he did the Family Way soundtrack before this, and George did Wonderwall and Electronic Sounds, and of course the Unfinished Music and Wedding Album and two versions that John and Yoko put together, Live Peace in Toronto. But in terms of official solo albums of actual song-based, it was McCartney, kind of competing in a way with Let It Be, and the other Beatles weren't too pleased. But it's such a great album. He played all the instruments. So many different issues of it. You know, this is half-speed master. I'm not a fan of half-speed mastering. Actually, someone sent me this, and I haven't played it. But I have plenty of copies, original UK, so I don't really need to listen to this. But I'm personally not a fan of this concept of half-speed mastering. But that's just neither here nor there. Now, I've said this before. This is amongst my favorite albums, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate the subtlety and the beauty of this record. Really well recorded. The first official Wings album, Wildlife. Very loose, very almost indie sound. We would kind of refer to this sound as indie rock these days, but there's some great stuff on here. Denny Laine and Denny Sewell and Wings. Wildlife, I think it holds up. And it's one of McCartney's records that is less dated. Because I would argue, we all know it, people always cite this as their favorite record. This is a sealed copy I got. Now, I've told people I don't like sealed records, right? But this is a record during my time at the record factory. It still has the store I worked at. And we got some extra records that were given to us. I don't remember all the details. And so I kept the seal because I already had a copy. But I do love this record, of course. How can you not? However, Bluebird, Mr. Vanderbilt, Mrs. Vanderbilt, excuse me. I knew her husband. No Words and Mamunia, to me, are not very good and don't hold up. And I think this, out of many of his albums, sounds very dated to me. But the highlights are incredible. 1985. I like Helen Wheels. I like Band on the Run, of course. That's one. Obviously, this when I did my ranking, this was my favorite McCartney album, Ram. I think this has blossomed and become a better record over the years. Some years ago during Record Store Day, I'm thinking 2012 or 13, possibly. This mono version came out, mono Ram, because it was never officially released as mono mixed. I think it's fun, it's interesting. It doesn't surpass the stereo version, Paul Linda Ram. Love this record. It's such a great record. I mean, there's so much into it. It has a certain roughness too, and a certain polish as well. 1976, the second time I ever saw a Beatle live. The 74 George Harrison Dark Horse tour was as wonderful as it was seeing a Beatle for the first time for me in 1974. The vocal strains that Harrison had was somewhat of a debacle, but in 76, this was an amazing show, and I saw 3 of the shows, 2 in the Bay Area, 2 in San Francisco, and 1 in Los Angeles at the Mighty Forum. But this is great. 3-record set, Hypnosis cover. This is a UK press that I got at the time. It came out, and it's a fantastic live album. I haven't revisited it in a while now. I think it's time, having just seen McCartney. Now, this is kind of a cool, let's see here. 1978, the first day I arrived, I think it was in March 1978, first time I arrived in London, and my friend picked me up at Heathrow. We drove into central London, and the first 2 songs I heard on the radio, one was Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush, and I was gobsmacked by that song, and I bought the single the next day on Oxford Street at the HMV store, I believe. And the other song I heard was With a Little Luck, and I can't remember if I heard it prior to that listening, but I distinctly remember being in my car, my friend's car. I remember walking across the London Bridge. I picked this copy up even though I could get it when I got home, I picked this up I think that same day at the HMV on Oxford Street as well. So I happen to love this record. Big poster inside. But, if you know the album, you know the poster. But I think this is a record that doesn't get a lot of love yet. Probably with the archives it'll come out. But there's a nice feel to it. I mean, there's some clunky stuff on here too, but there's a nice feel to this. I like it a lot. This record doesn't seem to get a lot of love either, but I quite like this record. This is Back to the Egg with Lawrence Juber and Joe English, and of course Denny Lane still. Steve Hawley on drums. And then the ill-fated, of course, soon after this, in 1980, the ill-fated tour on the way to Japan. McCartney gets busted, and that tour is canceled. And basically, Wings no longer exists. I think there's some really good things. I'm not a fan of Rockestra theme. I think it's a little heavy-handed, interesting, but heavy-handed. Reception, Getting Closer, We're Open Tonight, Spin It On is great. Again and Again, Old Siam Sir. Again and Again is the Denny Lane, I believe. Arrow Through Me is kind of a nice soulful song here. And then that kind of moody, poetic, multi-song, After the Ball. Again, After the Ball, A Million Miles is literally Amazing Grace rewritten. The Broadcast with the poetry, the literary voice, and So Glad to See You There, and Baby's Request, which is, again, right out of Honey Pie, and that kind of retro sound. McCartney loves going back to the traditional sound of music, like Your Mother Should Know. He's done it so many times when he goes to traditional songs that he kind of learned from his father, that rewriting those songs. So I do love this. McCartney 2 was another time. That was in 1980, actually, when I was in London. Also, when David and I went to work on the Beatles England book, and big window displays actually also in our book, there's a picture of these stand-ups of McCartney at the HMV on Oxford Street in our book. And that was obviously taken from this. And we went to MPL, Soho Square. And that was a real fun time. I'm going to kind of skip over Tug of War, which I think is an amazing album, great sounding album, is sort of re-teams with George Martin. But the follow-up to that, Pipes of Peace, I think is a dog of an album. There's some great things on it. I do like Pipes of Peace, the opening track, but there's a lot of crap on that album. It just doesn't work for me. The biggest debacle of McCartney's career is this. This is, give my regards to Broad Street, terrible movie, self-indulgent, and just not good. This is interesting only because it's a collaboration again with Paul McCartney and George Martin, where George and Paul sort of recreate some of his older songs, re-record some Beatles songs and some solo songs, reimagine them. Interesting, fun. The record works better than the film. I think this is the No More Lonely Nights. Is this the long version? I can't remember now which one. There's the one long version, not the disco version. I hate that dance version, but I like the version with the great David Gilmour guitar thing. I wish they'd done more like that, because I quite like that. But this is an album that didn't get a lot of love that I think has held up. Hugh Padgham, he brings in Hugh Padgham to produce him on Press to Play, and he had worked with Peter Gabriel, and he'd worked with, Phil Collins, the other Genesis drummer, and he'd worked with XTC, and he was kind of one of the producers du jour around this time. And this album came out in 1986, and I quite like it. There's some really beautiful stuff on here, some rockin' stuff. Stranglehold is kind of a nice sound, a guitar riff. Good Times Come and Feel the Sun. Talk More Tuck's got some great little bits of slowed down and altered voice bits mixed in there. I love the sound of it. I played this album just 2 weeks ago, and I blasted it, and it sounded really good. I fondly like it. Only Love Remains is one of his ballads, which is not bad. But Press was a somewhat of a hit. It was all over MTV. There's great shots of him in the London Underground on that song. Pretty Little Head is pretty good. Now, he co-wrote like half this record. He co-wrote the songs with Eric Stewart from 10cc, and they worked together on previous albums. I would have loved to have seen more actual collaborations aside from songs on the albums like Tug of War, I believe, or just after that with Eric Stewart. Because thing is, though, their voices are probably too similar. I really prefer the difference he had when he was writing with Elvis Costello. But again, great cover photograph by the great Hurrell, one of the great, amazing Hollywood photographers that took pictures in the 1930s of this kind of chiaroscuro lighting of light and dark, and he was very infamous shooting this on large format cameras. So they make it a point to call out George Hurrell, who took the cover photograph with the same box camera he used in Hollywood in the 1930s. And of course, Linda being a photographer and of the art, I'm sure she just loved having this done. So I enjoyed that. The genius part about this, genius is that word that I shouldn't use for this, but the name Flaming Pie, it comes from the quote, John Lennon, way back in the early Beatlemania days. How did you come by the name of the Beatles? Well, came with a flaming pie, and the name you recall the Beatles, and I'm totally misquoting that. Someone's going to tell me the exact thing because I don't remember, but it was a famous quote John Lennon did and how the Beatles got their name, kind of one of his snarky quips. This is an interesting album. I think a lot of it works well. Calico Skies is probably the most Beatlesque. It's got that great finger picking that Paul does, and it's just a gorgeous song. It could have been right out of the White Album, and I love that. Same with Young Boy. Young Boy is a fantastic song on here. So this is a good record, Flaming Pie. Let's see what else we got. Now, he did a series of records here. We could call it during the Starbucks years and those years. Now, okay, this is an album I have a lot of problems with, and this is Driving Rain. This is where David Kahn comes in. I think he worked with the Bangles and was out of San Francisco working on a lot of new wave bands out of San Francisco. He's the one who pulled together the band that McCartney has to this day, the two great guitar players that McCartney has. And, ironically, the band he has now have lasted longer than the Beatles were together. Interesting when you think of it like that. I actually like Riding into Jaipur, which is the closest Paul McCartney's probably ever come to write a song that sounds like a George Harrison song. Got that kind of Eastern melody and minor keys, and but it's got one of the worst songs Paul's ever written ever in the history of our planet, called Freedom. I know it was a knee-jerk reaction after the 9/11 tragedy, but terrible, insipid song about freedom, and not even good. Like, at least give peace a chance, even though it's simple. John Lennon, he nailed that, and I hate to put it in the same category, but it's a political statement. It's a song about pride, and because he was, I think, as I recall, Paul was literally on the runway at JFK when that happened. So suffice to say, they didn't take off. There's a few things on here that are okay, but for some reason, this album, I just never liked it from the day it came out, from the beginning. So I think it's a tosser. Is that what you kids say in the UK? Tosser? It's a tosser, Paul. It's a tosser. Now, also during what I call the Starbucks years, remember he was doing these songs that Concord was putting out, and I can't remember all the details. This is Parlophone Capital too. Okay, this one I quite like, and this is a great cover photograph that Mike McCartney, younger brother, took way back in the day in their backyard of Paul, a young lad, Paul McCartney, and Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. Now, a few songs on here that I really love. Fine Line is okay. I think it's okay, but a couple of the most beautiful songs Paul has written, again, that hark back to the Beatles' White Album period, and one is Jenny Wren. Jenny Wren, the guitar picking on that, it sounds like with Rocky Raccoon and Blackbird, and that picking he was doing, that style that Donovan showed John and Paul when they were in India. Jenny Wren is such a gorgeous song. It would have been just perfect around 1967, 68 Beatle album. And the other one is English Tea. Very twee, very beautiful, great orchestration, and I love it. Too Much Rain is kind of nice. A Certain Softness is very easy cocktail-like number, but I do like this record. It's much better than the last one. I think it's a beautiful cover, beautiful package. Paul McCartney there. I think this is the album that drove the barista at the Starbucks crazy, because they had to play it all the time in the store. And this is from 2007, and this is Memory Almost Full. Now, I like this record too. I think this is a really, really wonderful record as well. Dance Tonight. Did McCartney's sell out? Because that was all over Apple for Apple iPods and iTunes. Remember that song? And he's wearing his Chuck Converse in that video. You can go find it on YouTube. Great little number with his, I was going to say the mandolin, not the mandolin, the ukulele. Love that song. Ever Present Past is nice. Mr. Bellamy, again, very Beatles-ish, very Uncle Albert type of song from Ram, very much like that. Vintage Clothes is great, but the song that I really like on this, Nod Your Head is okay, that was a single also, but the song, I think it's some killer guitar on this, is House of Wax, and it's reminiscent to something off of maybe Venus and Mars and Band on the Run, and I think it's a really great rocker. He played it live at the Amoeba gig in LA that I had a friend that called me that morning and said, McCartney's playing today in Amoeba, if you can get to LA. But this was probably like 5 hours before the show would have started. I just couldn't do it. And if it was the day before, I would have flown down that night if I definitely had a wristband or whatever they had to get in it. But he said I could have gone. We'll see. But I like this record. So there you go. Now, I could go on and on and on and on. But let's cut to the chase here. I think, I've said this before, well, this is a couple things. Twin Freaks, really weird mashup versions of McCartney songs, DJ mashups, bizarre but really cool. If you can find this, you can probably find online Twin Freaks. There you go. But this is an album that's been very special to me. And those of you know, McCartney put out, prior to this, 2 albums under the name The Fireman. One was called Rushes In. Get it? The Fireman Rushes In, from the lyric from Penny Lane. And he collaborated with Youth. This is what I consider like the best McCartney album of the last quarter century. And I'm feeling this is the first of the trilogy of Fireman records where there's actually song-based singing. The first 2 are very ambient electronic records, very moody records. There's some voices, ethereal voices, but no lyrics. It's not really song-based. And they're really great for what they are. So what I would love for them to do one of the archive boxes that McCartney's been putting out. I think first they'll probably finish the 1970s with London Town and Back to the Egg. But I would love to see a Fireman archive series with all 3 albums. This is the only one that's song-based. And then maybe have some outtakes and projects, maybe add a new one. He can do another ambient version. Where he is right now, I think. I would love this side of McCartney, and I love that he likes to experiment and do something a little different. I'm still convinced that if this had been put out as a Paul McCartney solo album, this literally could have been McCartney 3 before McCartney 3 was made years later. Now, is having Youth kind of being a part of that make it not a solo record? I don't think so. I think they could have called this McCartney 3. What's nice about this, what they did is each night or each day of the session, they did one song. They completed one song. So some of the songs were literally written on the spot and finished that night. They would do pretty much start to finish. Now, did they add pieces later? I don't know. I don't remember. But that was the basic premise of how they approached this album. And it's just fantastic. Now, the first one, Nothing Too Much, just out of sight. I believe that was the song that he worked with Dave Grohl, and you can see videos of them. It's like a punk. It's like McCartney doing this loud, just assault-based, bashing rock and roll song. 2 Magpies could have been right out of Wings, Wildlife. It's very much like bebop and just really a beautiful, kind of a bluesy folk song there. Sing the Changes, an amazing anthem. You can see him do that on the David Letterman Theater, Ed Sullivan Theater, on the top when they did that live concert on David Letterman show years ago when this came out. Sing the Changes. It's just a really, really beautiful piece. Traveling Light, Highway, Sun is Shining, Dance to Her High. I don't think there's one bad song on here, and I just think this is a really strong album that fell through the cracks for a lot of people. So I'd say McCartney, this is something special. If you don't know this album, and if you're a McCartney fan, this is going to be a special album. If you're not, I think you might just like it as well. New. This is one I'm not enamored with. New. It turned me the wrong way when it came out. Queenie Eye is not bad. I don't know. It just didn't do much for me. I'm actually a fan of Egypt Station. And this one has grown on me. I think in years to come, this is going to be hailed as a minor masterpiece. It's him accepting where his vocals are and how to use them in a different way. And I would argue that 2 of the songs he did in this last tour with his voice that is somewhat dampened on the high notes, very much so. The 2 songs he sang from this album were probably some of the most successful songs because they're written in a range where he is not right now vocally. Come On to Me and For You, as crazy as those sound lyrically, they're really good. And this is a very strong album with a beautiful, beautiful cover. If this looks familiar to you, just look at the color palettes of George Harrison's Gone Tropo. I mean, how close is that, right? I wonder if Paul was thinking of this. Not that he copied, it's a whole different thing. This is a collage, different style, but the color palettes, almost like he took the paint set, almost the exact paint set, and played with this. So I think that's kind of interesting. And, you know, artists are influenced all the time. And if that's, you know, what can I say? But I enjoy that a lot. I have all the archive series, the CD boxes, some of the vinyl boxes. There's certain things, 12-inch singles, which I can go to. This is actually one. Now, this is a record that I like. I quite like too. I didn't show this one. Yeah, Flowers in the Dirt. I think I'm going to end it with this. I saw this tour too. I really like this. Hammer Stewart from Average White Band is on this. My disappointment on this is is the time, around the time, was it 1989, I believe, 1990? When McCartney was writing and collaborating with Elvis Costello. And I was so excited about that because Elvis Costello has that voice, which is more in the lines of a John Lennon than a McCartney, not as sweet, although he has good melody. And I think their voices work together, and they do sing on one song on this album. But, you know, Put It There, Figure of Eight, this one is such a great record. And also he has, let's see, who does he have? He has the other guitar player from the Pretenders on here, the second part of the Pretenders. That Day Is Done, again, is another version of him rewriting with Elvis Costello, I think, as I recall, Amazing Grace. It's got kind of gospel-y, dirge-like number and everything. But I wish they did an album together. They kind of wrote Veronica, which is on Spike, the Elvis Costello album that came out around this time, but I wish they had recorded a proper duet album, a collaboration album together. There's, on the extended box set of this, there is the McCartney and Elvis demos, which the potential is there. It could have been so good. It could have been so good. And this one seems to have fallen through the cracks over the last few years. And again, with that band, with Hammer Stewart of Average White Band and Robbie McIntosh, who was in the Pretenders for a while. I saw this tour as well, UC Berkeley and in Los Angeles, I recall. Actually in Anaheim, I believe. What's interesting about this, there's also an expanded CD which has a second disc of twice as many songs. He was very prolific in this time. And this is a great sounding record. And I think this record also holds its own there. Off the Ground's a great song. Hope and Deliverance. Peace in the Neighborhood. Now, Peace in the Neighborhood is what Freedom should have been in a way. That is a better song. Come On People is okay. Mistress and Maid, Biker, Like an Icon, maybe a little lyrically challenged, but musically is a really nice point too. So anyway, I enjoy this, Off the Ground, and this is 1992. I think this is a good album as well, so I just thought I would throw that out, and Off the Ground. So that's a little overview, sort of a rambling, improvisational overview of some of my favorite records of Paul McCartney. I don't need to get into the Beatles. You all know the Beatles stuff, but the solo stuff is important. And I've always said to people, when people bash McCartney, he's put out so much music. I mean, think of when he was 29 years old when the Beatles split up, 28, 29. And if he hadn't done one note after that, he would have been sort of solidified historically. I mean, even now, look where he is. Look at all the music he's made. Now, every album he puts out, there's at least 4 to 5 great songs. There might be, half of them or less maybe clunkers, but he keeps putting it out. He keeps enjoying making records. So I love it, and I'm all in. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Mazzy loves you.